fact, it is just a hard chapter to understand just to begin with. And the reason it's such a hard chapter is because there are two different thoughts of what this chapter is about. There is one of the theories or one of the precepts that people come up with is that this is a continuation of Daniel's vision that we started back over in 10. And it is a continuation and it finishes up in 12. Therefore, it should not be broken up. Then there are those that believe that his vision is real good. But when they get to the 12th chapter, they want to take the 12th chapter of his vision and they want to place it all the way to the end of time. Now, in order to do that, you have to get out the millennialists and your premillennialists in order for their theory to come about. They believe that what's going to happen is that one day, you and I, that are Christians, that we're just going to vanish. And we're going to be gone. And all the people that are not good, all the people that are evil, all the people that have not obeyed the gospel, they're going to stay here on this earth. And they're going to stay here, then there's going to be 7 years of the most horrifying, worst times ever that there's ever been. But at the end of the 7 years, then the Lord's going to return with all the saints that he took 7 years before, and all the ones that's up there, that were already up there before all the people on earth went that way. He's going to bring them all back to this earth. He's going to then cause the resurrection of those evil people along with those that are still here. They'll then be changed. He'll cast everybody to the lake of fire, and then Jesus is going to go over to Jerusalem. He's going to sit on David's throne for 1,000 years while we're all here living on this earth. At the end of 1,000 years, then we will go to the Revelation 21 where it says there's a new heaven and a new earth, and we'll be on this new heaven, and there'll be this new earth, and we'll dwell on that forever. Now that's the theory of the premillennialist and the amillennialist, and what they believe that's going to take place. And even your Baptists also believe, a lot of your Baptist churches, they believe this too. They go with it. They go with this rapture, but they don't go with the other part about the 1,000-year reign. But they do believe in the rapture and people just being left here for 7 years while this place is in dire straits. Problem is, I can't go there because I don't find that in here. Now, it might be, as I said, it might be in the book of imagination, but I don't see it in my Bible anywhere. Well, if we get over to Daniel, we start getting in, and your title above the 12th chapter that you see may say the end times. The question is, what end times? Is it the end times of the end, which some try to go there? Or is it just telling us it's the end times of this vision and telling us who this particular vision, who it's going to be designated for, and what it's all about? By the way, hopefully, Lord willing, we get through with Daniel 12 tonight. Starting next week, I'm going to do a series of lessons on the Holy Spirit. So you might want to come for that, because we're going to talk a little bit about the Holy Spirit. I've got several lessons that I think will be of interest. Three words that I want you to think about as we look at the final directions that's given by God in chapter 12 to Daniel. The three words that I want you to think about are these words: at that time. At that time. So if you would, have chapter 12 ready to go in just a few moments, but before I do that, I'd like to kind of set my introduction here for us in a way. Now, many of y'all have watched TV, and you've watched TV throughout the years, and there have been some memorable endings that some of these shows have come up with. Now, much of you that are either Krista will know about this. There may be many of you that will know. I don't think the young kiddos here will know exactly about these shows, but do you remember, how many of you remember Red Skelton Show? Remember the Red Skelton Show? Do you remember how Red Skelton always ended his show? Do you remember what he said? What did he say? God, he said, good night, and may God bless. Now, you don't hear that on very many shows now, do you? That was his ending. Do you know for 19 years, CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite always sounded off at the end of his program? Do you remember what he said? And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. Talking about that day. You remember Roy Rogers, his program that he had on? He was known as the singing cowboy. Do you remember how they ended their show? Happy trails to you until we meet again. That was his sign-off. And then Carol Burnett. You remember her show, the Carol Burnett? She sung a lot. Do you remember how she ended her show? I'm so glad we've had this time together. These are all endings of how these people ended their shows. Well, as we come to Daniel tonight in the final episode, there is not going to be a sign-off that Daniel gives us. And he's not going to leave us with a song. He, however, is going to give us and tell us about the ultimate victory of Daniel's people. So if you're looking at Daniel 12 and verse 1, and you can remember these words, at that time, you'll see that those are located in the first verse already for you. It says, at that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Are you looking at that last part that says everyone that shall be found written in the book? The usage of men in many cases concerning this is writing select names in a book, showing that the salvation shall not be national. It will neither be to Jew nor to a Gentile nation only, but that it will be a gathering together of God's elect, as it tells us in Romans the 9th chapter, which was scattered abroad, and therefore it is referred to as a remnant. And then it says to be assisted. If you're looking there, it says assisted by Michael, the great prince, who stands watch over the sons of your people. So it says again those three words, at that time, Michael shall stand up. Now the question here is this one. Who is Michael? Who is Michael here? Michael is the archangel of God. He is the commander. He also is the commander of the heavenly army. It says at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. Sons of your people. So the angel Michael is here, the protector of the Jewish people. And during these wars that we've been talking about that occurred during this particular 400 or 450 years that goes on that I'm trying to explain to you about, he's going to play a vital role here in basically trying to preserve a remnant of God's people from the mass slaughter of an evil man by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes. If you would, turn back in your Bibles to Daniel the 10th chapter, and let's look at verses 13 and verses 21. Daniel 10, verses 13 and 21. In Daniel 10, verse 13, it says, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the king of Persia. Now go to verse 21. But I will tell you what is noted in the scripture of truth. No one upholds me except these, except Michael, your prince. Now verse 1, back over in chapter 12, it talked about the book. And now, over here in the 10th chapter, verse 21, it says, some of your versions may say, the book of truth. Now, if we went over to Revelation, the 20th chapter, verse 15, there's a book over there mentioned. What is that book called? It's called the Book of Life. So Daniel is revealing in verse 1 here in chapter 12 that a time of trouble will come to the end time unlike anything that the world has ever seen before. And while the whole world winds up going to suffer during these wars, there is this tiny little country that we've been talking about that's going to be at the epicenter. And that tiny little country is called Israel. It says, in a time of trouble not seen before the deliverance of Daniel's people at that time. Now, I don't know if you've studied Zechariah. We can also do Zechariah. It's a good book to study. But if you look at the prophet Zechariah, Zechariah tells us also that during that time that there were 2/3 of the Jewish people that they will die and only 1/3 will survive. So the time just previously described, and then we have the time of the conflict involving Antiochus Epiphanes. Now it also tells us in 12 verse 2, many who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. It says that many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. Now let me ask you a question. If you don't throw this over to the end of time like some of them do, let me ask you about you. When you die, where are you going to be? In the grave. You're going to be in the dust of the earth. What is there that you're looking forward to happen to you? You're looking for you to be able to rise up. You're looking for you to not be told that you have some kind of shame and everlasting contempt. It says some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. That's just about everybody. Everybody will be raised either to shame and everlasting contempt, or some will be raised to everlasting life. That's everybody. I want you to note that this is not likely the physical resurrection from the dead, for then all, and not many, that the verse says, shall be raised. In fact, let's just go over, if you would, to John the 5th chapter. And if we look at verses 28 and 29, I want you to see the difference that we're looking at here as to what we're looking in Daniel 12 and what John said in the 5th verse. It said, do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which how many who are in the graves? All who are in the graves, not many. All who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of damnation. Now what about some of those that have been in the dust of the earth? What does verse 3 say about it? Notice it says, those who will shine at this time. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. So the wise here will shine like the brightness of the firmament. But those who turn many to righteousness, they will shine like the stars forever and ever. Using the figure of the resurrection, this can also may depict the Maccabean revolt when the Jews came out of caves and mountains, hideouts to resist Antiochus. Antiochus. Go now back to Daniel 11. And because this is still in connection with the previous vision that we've already talked about. He's just wrapping the vision up in verse 12. In Daniel 11, verses 33 through 35. It says, and those of the people who understand shall instruct many. Yet for many days they shall fall by the sword and flame, by captivity and plundering. Now when they fall, they shall be aided with a little help, but many shall join with them by intrigue. And some of those of understanding shall fall, to refine them, purify them, make them white, until the time of the end, because it is still for the appointed time. So there is still talking about an appointed time, or at that time. So Daniel is going to be given here final instructions, and answers are going to be given to Daniel. And Daniel is told something to do concerning this vision in the 4th verse. Look over at 12, verse 4. He's going to tell him to shut up the words and to seal the book until the time of the end. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Perhaps what is meant here is to stop writing and secure that which has been written. Well, let's compare this now. Go back to Daniel 8. And let's go back to Daniel 8, and let's look at verses 17, verses 19, and verses 26. That's Daniel 8. We'll start off with verse 17. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, son of man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Verse 19. And he said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation. For at the appointed time the end shall be. Verse 26. And the vision of the evenings and the mornings, which was told, is true. Therefore seal up the vision, for it refers to many years or days. Refers to many days in the future. Both versions of Daniel 8 and Daniel 8, chapter 10 through chapter 12 were to be sealed up. Well, both of them that we see in these verses here, both pertain to many days in the future. Yet both visions began to be fulfilled within this 200 to 400 year gap between the testaments. Now, contrast, and we've talked about this, contrast Revelation 22. Go to Revelation 22 and see what is said to do about this vision. A whole different answer about this vision that we had in Revelation. In Revelation 22 and 10, and he said to me, do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. So the vision of Revelation you see here was not to be sealed because the time was at hand. How then can you have the explanation that some make about the events of Revelation have yet to begin nearly 2,000 years later? So two final questions here are answered. But if you'll notice, when we go back to Daniel 12 and verses 5 through 7, one question is overheard by Daniel. And this is the one I want you to look at. Daniel 12, verses 5 through 7. One question overheard by Daniel. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank, and the other on that riverbank. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river? And how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, And when he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it shall be for a time, and times, and half a time, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. So let's put this in sequence. I'm going to put them here on the screen. Daniel saw two others, one on each side of a riverbank. One asked the man clothed in linen. He said, above the river, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? How long shall these wonders be? And what was the answer? A time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Now, if you were to go back to Daniel 10, 5 through 6, it also talks a little bit about this too. But you can see it was for a time, times, and half a time. Well, how long is that? Well, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. Remember where we read it will be days? It didn't say it'd be years. It didn't say it'd be a millennial. It said it would be days. And it's common use to describe a definite, marked period of tribulation. Now go back now to Daniel 7, and let's look at verse 25. You remember we talked about this Antiochus Epiphanes as we were going through the book? It says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and laws. Then the saints shall be given unto his hands for a time, and times, and half a time. Now, a lot of people, when they get over here, they go over to Revelation, the 11th chapter, and they look at verses 2 and 3. Go over there. I want you to see this. Revelation 11, verses 2 and 3. Last book of the New Testament. You knew that, Ronnie, did you? You knew that's the last book of the New Testament. Revelation 11, 2 through 3. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it's been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the holy city underfoot for 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Now go back and look at 12 and chapter 12 and verse 6. In Revelation. Did the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, that she should feed her there 1,260 days. Now 13 and 14. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the presence of the serpent. And then chapter 13 and verse 5, and it says there that he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. So here we see through that scripture, and even in John's Revelation, it's talking about this time, times, and half a time. Now when the persecution here then has completed its purpose, we can see here that then the things described will take place. So here's the question that's asked by Daniel. Go back to 12, and let's look at verses 8 through 3. When we look at these particular verses here, not understanding, Daniel asked a question. And here's the question Daniel's asking. What shall be the end of these things? And what is Daniel first told? He's told to go, for the words are closed and sealed till the time of the end. What else is he told? That many shall be purified, and the wise shall understand. Daniel 11, 33 through 35. He's also told that the wicked shall do wickedly and not understand in Daniel 11:32. And then he's told that there will be a period of 1,290 days beginning from the time the daily sacrifice is taken away. And so if we also look at Daniel 11:31, the abomination of desolation is set up. And then in Daniel 11:31, and forces, it also says, and forces, I believe that's on there, and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifice and place there abomination of desolation. Now what about those who wait? Those who wait, they come to 1,335 days, and then they will be blessed. Now whether this, I told you this is hard to grasp. Whether this is literal or figuratively, these numbered days appear to apply to the period of Antiochus Epiphanes' persecution in 168 BC. Now the reason I think that is because what Daniel is told. Daniel is told to go his way till the end. Then it says, for he shall rest and arise to his inheritance at the end of days. Well, the end of days. The end of days may refer to the actual resurrection of the day of judgment, not the time of the end spoken of through this particular vision. So we have seen then that we have the vision of the time of the end, talked about in Daniel the 10th chapter, verses 1 through 12 and 12 and 13, describe events that would affect Daniel's people. Who is this affecting? What people are we talking about here? We're talking about Israel. We are in between the testaments of a period of time where this evil man named Epiphanes is going around trying to murder all and everybody in Israel and destroy them all, man, woman, and child. If he had been successful and been able to do that, then where would Christ have come from? How would we have got the seed here in Matthew? What would have happened to the lineage of Christ? We're back here in Daniel. How would these other things have even taken place? Because there would have been no way if Epiphanes had been able to have slaughtered and wiped out everyone. But there was a remnant that was going to be saved and then take place in the latter days. For the vision refers to many days yet to come, not many years or centuries to come. And then it would occur in the time of the end. Now, as we look at this context here in the scriptures here, the time of the end, it likely refers to the closing days of God's dealings with Israel and his covenant nation. In other words, we're talking about here, I'll put it up here, the intertestamental period between the days of Malachi and Matthew. It also is the period of time involving the Greek-Persian and Egyptian-Syrian conflicts. So as you look at this, you can also saw this when we looked at the vision of the ram and the goat. The vision of the ram and the goat also depicted many of the same events that we're talking about tonight. So as we close the study of this book of Daniel, we have found that it is a book that basically strengthens our faith. It strengthens our faith in his word and his fulfilled prophecies. And prophecies describing the rise and fall of world empires. Where were those world empires? Where were they mentioned? They were mentioned in Daniel 2, Daniel 3, and Daniel 4, and Daniel 5. And then prophecies foretelling the establishment of God's everlasting kingdom, we looked at Daniel 2 and 7 and 9. And then as we now look at Daniel 8 and 9 and 10, 11 and 12, you've got prophecies depicting the events to befall the people of Israel. So as we look at this, we see it inspires faithfulness to God through the examples of those dedicated people that were in Daniel. Who am I talking about that had faith and dedication in Daniel? I'm talking about the ones that brought up in Daniel 1, also the ones that are brought up in Daniel 6. You've got Daniel, you've got Shadrach, you've got Meshach, you've got Abednego that's mentioned in Daniel 9. Now, while I will agree with you that there is much to be discussed in this 12th chapter that can challenge our understanding and still leave us in many ways kind of in limbo, we should not neglect the spiritual treasures that were provided for God's people because of what happened between the Testaments, told to us in Romans the 12th chapter and verse 4. So I say to you, this particular vision, from what I see, is this vision was let Daniel know that even though all these wars were taking place, and that Israel was between these two massive great powers that were fighting and going back and forth across their land, I believe he wanted him to know that not everybody would be killed, that there would still be a remnant, that there would still be a way in which that there would be people that died, that they would rise again to glory, that they'd be able to be like the sun, they'd be able to shine like the stars, that there would be no end because he would keep that remnant going and not to be sad and not to be worried, even though there were tribulation periods that were gonna be ahead. We also have tribulation periods that happen when the destruction of Jerusalem comes. And during that time, that was awful. And you know, they went through there and they completely destroyed the temple, they completely destroyed everything, and then the people were scattered. And from the time the destruction of Jerusalem happens until we get to 1900 and I believe 48, Israel has no homeland anywhere. And just happened to be because of World War II. And Israel, the Jews had been done the way they'd been done by Hitler and by Mussolini and by Stalin, and how that they had been almost killed off, 6 million of them. They wanted a homeland that they could go back to, and they wanted to go back to their homeland. And so they made a way for them to go back to where their homeland was and gave them some land. Well, they took some of the land that they gave them away from the Palestinians. And the Palestinians are mad because they got some of that land and are living there, and they're all mad because they want that land back. And until they get it, they're not going to quit fighting. And it's not ever going to end until God and Christ puts it to an end. Or it happens the way Christ and God want it to happen. Daniel is an interesting book. It's a great book until you get to chapter 12, and it seems to people kind of wonder, well, which direction do I go here? I've given you my best thought, my best take on it. If you think it has to do with the end of time, right before Christ comes,